North Korea's been launching new missile tests. These ones aimed, it seems, at US bases in Japan.
Carl Vinson Carrier Battle Group is entering Korean waters as the tension generated by North Korean threats of nuclear war and the growing defiance of the US Commander-in-Chief, President Donald Trump, and the international community reaches a heightened level.
Ultimately, I believe that we are going to get rid of most of those problems, and there won't be fear of anybody. That's the way it should be. We have a very big problem in North Korea, and as I said, I really think that China is going to try very hard and has already started. A lot of the coal boats have already been turned back. You saw that yesterday and today. They've been turned back. The vast amount of coal that comes out of North Korea going to China, they've turned back the boats. That's a big step, and they have many other steps that I know about. So we'll see what happens. It may be effective, it may not be effective. It's not effective. We will be effective, I can promise you that.
As of March 16, 2017, the deployment of the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense Anti-Ballistic Missile Systems, or THAAD, capable of intercepting short, medium, and intermediate range ballistic missiles with hypersonic infrared accuracy as the missile's flight path reaches a termination phase, have been underway between South Korean officials and U.S. military, regardless of condemnation by the Chinese government and South Korean protest groups. However, China has deployed 150,000 extra troops to the North Korean border. Meanwhile, there is speculation that Kim Jong-un will likely go into hiding, just as his father did during the Iraq War for 6 weeks. Regardless, the North Korean state news outlet Rodong Sinmun defiantly stated, "The South Korean puppet warmongers' war drills targeting the North are very risky provocations, little short of setting fire on an arsenal. A touch-and-go situation is prevailing due to the hideous provocations of the U.S. and the South Korean puppet group of traitors, spurring the execution of the special operation targeting the supreme leadership of the DPRK while staging the largest ever North-targeted joint military drills. The DPRK is sure of its final victory in its showdown with the U.S. The Korean War in the 20th century brought about the beginning of a downhill turn for the U.S., but the one in the 21st century will end in the final doom of the U.S. The foolhardy maneuvers of the puppet forces are reminiscent of a puppy knowing no fear of the tiger. Again, that from Rodong Sinmun, the North Korean state news outlet. An annual report of North Korea's military capabilities by the U.S. Department of Defense, released in early 2014, identified the North Koreans' army strength at 950,000 personnel, 4,200 tanks, 2,200 armored vehicles, 8,600 artillery guns, and over 4,800 multiple rocket launchers.
China's foreign minister has warned conflict between the United States and North Korea could break out at any moment. And those words come as tensions grow in the region. Earlier, Washington had pledged a harsh reaction to Pyongyang's warning that it will carry out a nuclear weapons test this weekend.
We are sending an armada.
If you become a threat to others, at some point a response is likely to be undertaken.
Well, North Korea was quick to respond, its vice foreign minister saying that the country would confront any threat from the US with a preemptive strike. He warned that Pyongyang has a powerful nuclear deterrent. North Korea's general staff added on Friday that the country will strike US military bases in Japan and South Korea, as well as the South Korean president's residence in Seoul should America attack.
Concern growing that North Korea may be even closer to launching another nuclear test than we thought, as Pyongyang blames President Trump's, quote, aggressive tweets for the rising tension in that region. Senior Foreign Affairs correspondent Greg Palcott is live today for us from Pyongyang.
Hi, Shannon. War talk coming from North Korea on the eve of maybe the most dangerous day of the year here. North Korea's leader, Kim Jong-un, his deputy foreign minister, Han Sung-ryul, speaking to Associated Press today and telling them what we have been hearing from North Korean officials here for the past couple of days, that they will confront what they call reckless U.S. military maneuvers with a preemptive strike using a powerful nuclear deterrent. Here's a bit more of what he had to say.
We are taking into account the most aggressive and dangerous option that the U.S. might come up with. And we also have our options, our countermeasures ready in our hands, which means we'll go to war if they choose.
Concern growing that North Korea may be even closer to launching another nuclear test than we thought, as Pyongyang blames President Trump's, quote, aggressive tweets for the rising tension in that region. Senior Foreign Affairs correspondent Greg Palcott is live today for us from Pyongyang.
Hi, Shannon. War talk coming from North Korea on the eve of maybe the most dangerous day of the year here. North Korea's leader, Kim Jong-un, his deputy foreign minister, Han Sung-ryul, speaking to Associated Press today and telling them what we have been hearing from North Korean officials here for the past couple of days, that they will confront what they call reckless U.S. military maneuvers with a preemptive strike using a powerful nuclear deterrent. Here's a bit more of what he had to say.
We are taking into account the most aggressive and dangerous option that the U.S. might come up with. And we also have our options, our countermeasures ready in our hands, which means we'll go to war if they choose.
As the people of Pyongyang get ready to mark the anniversary of the birthday of the founder, Kim Il-sung, there have also been reports that they might detonate a nuclear device at this time. That official today said the government would do that at the time and the place of their choosing. Finally, as we watch North Korean military officers pay their respects at the birthplace of the founder just outside of Pyongyang, we also heard that official talk about President Trump, saying that he was the one making trouble these days with his administration's vicious and aggressive provocations. Listen to some provocative words that we heard from a North Korean colonel today.
Even though the U.S. is trying to invade our country or attack it, they won't do it. Because we have such a major strength, if they do it, we would smash their heads, we would blow them up.
By the way, at one point, President Trump has suggested that he could share a hamburger with Kim Jong-un to work things out. Well, we heard from that official on this point, too, and he said no way, that it was just lip service. Fighting words. Back to you.
That would be very interesting. All right, Greg Palcott, thank you very much.
The world is on edge as countries brace for a possible military conflict between the U.S. and North Korea. Experts expect some sort of missile test may occur this weekend during Day of the Sun celebrations in North Korea. And we know that President Donald Trump has mobilized the Navy to the Korean peninsula. Both sides calling each other aggravators in this situation. Will it turn into an all-out war?
This is a Fox News alert. The Associated Press reporting North Korea has attempted and failed to launch another missile. The report's citing South Korean media saying that the launch was attempted on North Korea's east coast, a day after a parade in the capital city featured military hardware, including possible ballistic missiles.
I think that the most important thing first is to address if they were to launch a missile over the weekend in commemoration of the birth of their founder, what would that potentially look like, and what kind of sophisticated technology and potentially nuclear intercontinental missile are we talking about here, Tony?
Well, Martha, we have very effective counter-missile capability already in the theater. The Aegis cruisers that we both, the Japanese type we both have, are very effective in capturing a missile in boost phase. That is to say, the initial takeoff going into the atmosphere is a very good time to do it. We're good. The problem is this. We do know for a fact they do have the ability to reach Japan and our allies, the South Koreans. There's a very good possibility, based on what I've been told, that they can reach the United States with a ballistic missile. The question becomes, is the technology sufficient to mount a nuclear warhead to the nose cone of those missiles? So this is no small issue.
It's been 2 weeks since the news of Kim Jong-nam's death broke, and with police investigations, arrests, and autopsy results being released, a clearer picture is coming out of how the attack was carried out. But with the new details, an expert says the apparent assassination has set a new precedent. Kwon Jung-ho has this report.
A whole new type of terror. That's how a former North Korea spy has described the regime's use of VX, the most powerful chemical agent in the world. Speaking at a seminar in Seoul on Monday, Kim Dong-sik, who defected to the south in 1995, said the manner in which Kim Jong-nam was killed is something he had never seen before. The half-brother of North Korea's leader, Kim Jong-un, was at Kuala Lumpur International Airport on February 13th when two women approached him from behind and smothered the toxic agent on his face. The two suspects, one Indonesian and one Vietnamese, have claimed they were not aware who the victim was and that they thought they were taking part in a reality TV show prank. The suspects are thought to have been directed by 4 North Korean men who are believed to have returned to Pyongyang. Kim Dong-sik, the former spy, pointed out that there is a precedent in 2011 when a North Korean agent bribed one defector to poison another. But the use of unsuspecting and unconnected intermediaries, such as the two women, is something new.
This is a Fox News alert. 2 U.S. officials confirming to Fox that North Korea has tested and test-launched a ballistic missile into the Sea of Japan roughly about 1 hour ago. The missile has been assessed to be a KN-17, a former Scud missile that officials believe is being tested to one day target ships. The missile flew, we're told, roughly 25 miles, was in the air for about 15 minutes. The KN-17 was launched from Pukchang. Reuters is reporting that launch appears to have failed, but again, a test launch of a ballistic missile from North Korea, ratcheting up tensions that were already high this week, as you had the Secretary of State at the United Nations, you had the President talking about a possible major conflict that could be coming down if North Korea does not change its ways. Breaking news.
Now, Japan has dispatched its largest warship to protect a US supply ship near the Japanese coast, apparently aimed at demonstrating the strong Tokyo-Washington security alliance and deterring North Korea's threats. With more on this and other news in East Asia, we turn, as always, to our No Adam. So, Adam, this is the first such operation since Japan passed controversial laws expanding the role of its military. Can you just run us through the details here?
Well, Mark, after leaving its base in Yokosuka on Monday morning, the helicopter carrier by the name of Izumo has now joined the US supply vessel of Chiba Prefecture just east of Tokyo, and it will accompany it to waters off Shikoku in western Japan.
Well, North Korea has done it again, detained another American, according to the state-run news agency. The latest believed to be the 4th U.S. citizen who is being held there. The regime of Kim Jong-un grabbing Americans, it seems, in reaction to the tensions with the U.S. over its nuclear ambitions. North Korea alleging unspecified hostile acts against a man it identifies as Kim Hak-song, who reportedly works for the Pyongyang University of Science and Technology. So, what can the Trump administration do to protect Americans abroad from being exploited and arrested?
No, Kim Jong-un's reign of terror appears to be continuing, with another high-ranking North Korean official apparently executed. Sources say Army General Lee Young-gil probably paid the ultimate price for criticizing Kim's leadership appointments.
We're learning today that North Korean leader Kim Jong-un sent over 10 terror groups to China and Southeast Asian countries. As we reported last night, sources say this is to revenge against South Koreans after 13 North Korean workers escaped from Pyongyang-run restaurants in China late April. South Korean authorities are preparing to strengthen their security at local residents there.
U.S. Special Operations Forces are ready to strike at North Korea's nuclear facilities and other sites housing weapons of mass destruction in the event of a future conflict. Testifying to Congress on Wednesday, Army General Raymond Thomas said elite U.S. military commandos have been training to neutralize the regime's nuclear and missile capabilities if necessary.
Lawmakers in the United States have introduced a bill to consider whether North Korea should be redesignated as a state sponsor of terrorism. The calls include an investigation into the 2014 cyber attack on Sony Pictures, as well as hackings into South Korean agencies. And gasoline prices in North Korea have reportedly soared amid speculation China may limit oil supplies to the country in a bid to pressure Pyongyang over its nuclear ambitions.
Pyongyang launched a ballistic missile early Sunday morning. What's significant about this act is that it comes just a few days after the new South Korean president, with a friendlier approach to inter-Korean relations, is sworn into office. Pyongyang claims it is ready for a meeting with Washington. Choi Sun-hee, the Director General of the North America Bureau of North Korea's Foreign Ministry, told reporters in Beijing on Saturday the regime will hold talks with the United States under the right conditions.
More now on Kim Jong-un's latest provocation, yet another missile launch. A Pentagon official confirming to Fox News that North Korea has yet again defied the international community, launching some sort of ballistic missile just hours ago. But the Pentagon hasn't exactly confirmed on what type of missile that was.
A Japanese news outlet claims China put a stop to a planned nuke test by North Korea. If that is indeed true, it could suggest a collaboration between Beijing and Washington's leaders may have had a positive effect.
Now, since late last week, malicious software has been taking computers hostage in an unprecedented worldwide outbreak, locking people out of their data and demanding hundreds of dollars to let them back in. Our Ian Shin tells us how some experts claim to have found evidence linking the so-called ransomware to North Korea.
Alarming new information coming from North Korea. That launch over the weekend looking even more dangerous than we first thought. Pyongyang saying that it launched a missile. Now experts say it's the longest range ballistic missile yet tested, and that missile was up in the air for the longest time ever. It traveled just under 500 miles, but at a high altitude, landing just off the coast of Russia. With a flatter trajectory, it could have hit the U.S. military base on the island of Guam, could have a range of something like 2,500 miles. Now, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un was reportedly ecstatic, again claiming that this could carry a nuclear warhead.
Our top story this morning, the United Nations Security Council is gearing up to roll out new sanctions against North Korea and boost the enforcement of existing ones following the regime's recent missile launch. And the international community is continuing to react to North Korea's recent missile launch. The U.S., Russia, and the UN have condemned Pyongyang for its destabilizing actions, but Russian President Vladimir Putin is suggesting the related parties try more carrot and a little less stick to coax the regime back to talks.
Here's what I find concerning. It traveled an altitude of 1,200 miles, a distance of 435 miles, only 60 miles shy of Russia. The altitude factor, if you change the angle of that, you can go a lot further away. Nonetheless, this would have encompassed all of Japan and all of South Korea. What finds you concerned about that now?
That's right. It's a medium-range ballistic missile, which means essentially it's got the capability to reach U.S. air bases in the Pacific, including Guam. So in that sense, this test constitutes a direct threat to U.S. national security interests.
North Korea has blasted the Moon Jae-in administration for its response to last weekend's missile test by the regime. In its first condemnation of the newly elected President Moon since he took office, Pyongyang accused the South Korean government of colluding with foreign powers to conspire against North Korea. US President Donald Trump has hinted at a more lenient North Korea policy. Trump made the remarks during a meeting at the White House with President Moon's visiting envoy to the United States. Connie Kim with this report.
President Trump says he's willing to make peace through dialogue with North Korea if conditions are right. That's what he told South Korea's special envoy to the U.S., Hong Seok-hyun, at the White House, where Trump reportedly made clear he does not support talks for their own sake.
President Trump said he hopes to work closely with President Moon to resolve the North Korean nuclear issue and get a result.
Trump's choice of the word peace regarding the North Korea issue has also shed light on whether there is room for change in Washington's current North Korea policy of maximum pressure and engagement.
U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson called on North Korea to trust Washington, that it's not seeking regime change, and that a halt to the North's nuclear activities could lead to talks. The top diplomat's comments suggest America is continuing to push for engagement with Pyongyang.
Going to continue to breed the same kind of pressure internationally that we've been trying to. We're going to continue to work the issue. As you know, if this goes to a military solution, it is going to be tragic on an unbelievable scale.
You know, that's the defense secretary talking about North Korea. All options, all other economic measures we seem to have taken don't seem to do the trick. And, of course, the North Koreans keep heaving missiles. Remember, they seem to do so every weekend, so they're due for one this weekend. Hudson Institute National Security Fellow Rebecca Heinrichs. You know, Rebecca, what he seems to be intimating there is that a military solution, which might be our last option, is a devastating option. And there are no good tacks we take. So it raises the question, what would that military option be? Shooting down a missile over the Korean peninsula if the dictator there launches one? Over land? What?
Well, you know, we have to be prepared for anything. We certainly have. That's why we deployed the THAAD battery, that's a missile defense battery, to South Korea. Remember, we've got something like 28,000 American forces and associated personnel there to defend South Korea, our ally. So we don't want a military option. But again, missile defense is an option. If they do shoot a missile, you know, the United States might have to shoot one down, but there will be more, which is why the United States has to, of course, protect ourselves with our own missile defense systems at home. But you know, the Secretary of Defense is right. We do not want a military to use military force against Korea, but we got to be prepared to do it if we need to.
Last Sunday, North Korea fired off another missile, and now the U.S. confirmed the launch was a successful one. Citing unnamed defense officials, NBC News said the KN-17 did not burn up. In fact, its re-entry into the atmosphere was controlled, and the missile landed in the sea near Russia. Though the source didn't confirm claims by Pyongyang state media that it was a medium long-range ballistic rocket that can carry a heavy nuclear warhead, they characterized the test of the liquid-fueled single-stage missile as an advancement in the regime's technology. In his latest news conference, U.S. Defense Chief Jim Mattis said Washington is working to find a diplomatic solution to North Korea issues with the international community, indicating the Trump administration will seek to exhaust alternatives before turning to military action.
Let's bring in General Jack Keane, retired four-star general, chairman of the Institute for the Study of War, former vice chief of staff of the Army, and of course, a Fox News military analyst. General, thank you so much for joining us.
Good to be here, Liz.
I want to get your reaction on Ellison's reporting because we had heard the Secretary of State Rex Tillerson say that he feels they could be acting out in the pressure that they're feeling, but then we also hear that they also launched their most successful test missile to date a week ago. What's your reaction to this?
Well, the North Koreans, they're continuing to pursue their very aggressive missile ballistic testing program, despite our diplomatic efforts, despite our economic pressure of sanctions, despite enjoining the Chinese to help here. I think it's this timing of this probably has something to do with Trump's visit to the Middle East, certainly, because Kim Jong-un, his history is he wants attention. The world's focused someplace else. He's going to get a little bit of attention here. But I think what will happen with the team in the White House and the State Department, eventually they're going to have to come to grips with, is China really helping here or not? And here's why I'm saying that. China has said that we're going to not accept their coal products anymore. Well, the fact is, after that statement they made, they did accept some coal products.
So
secondly, China said they're going to cut off the oil and not give it to North Korea. But there's no way we can check on it because it goes through a pipeline. Right. So some assessment will eventually have to be made. Is China gaming us like some of us suspect they are? And they're not going to really deliver here. And then we're going to have to go this by ourselves.
Disregarding numerous warnings from the international community, North Korea raised the stakes on Sunday, testing its second missile in the space of a week. The regime claims it was a success and that its leader Kim Jong-un observed the test. South Korea has slammed the provocation, calling it reckless and irresponsible, with President Moon Jae-in convening an emergency meeting shortly after the launch.
North Korea has carried out a new missile test just 8 days after its last test launch. It was initially picked up on by South Korea's military and later confirmed by Japan and the United States. More details now from Murad Gazdiev.
When it comes to North Korea, passions aren't being inflamed, they're on fire and burning hotter seemingly every week. Another ballistic missile launch, 1 week since its last such launch. We know they launched this missile, which flew for 500 kilometers. They launched at 8 a.m. GMT from the South Pyongyang province. It supposedly landed in the Sea of Japan. Nevertheless, Japan's already come out. It's condemned this launch. It said it was a danger to shipping, to aviation. But it also had a message, and Japan's Minister of Foreign Affairs said this: "I feel strongly that further pressure is needed when assessing North Korea's provocative behavior. I will continue to work with China while working with the US and South Korea. We have to think about it." And that is the message coming from all of these countries, South Korea, Japan, the United States. It is about meeting North Korea and fighting fire with fire. Earlier on, North Korea vowed that such an approach would not work. As it said, the more the US increases pressure against us, the more we will ramp up our efforts to boost our nuclear deterrence. The United States earlier said that they won't back down, that they will meet North Korea at every turn and fight them with much the same tactics. Here's what the United States UN representative had to say.
He's in a state of paranoia. He's incredibly concerned about anything and everything around him. And so what we're going to do is continue to tighten the screws. He feels it. He absolutely feels it. And we're going to continue, whether it's sanctions, whether it's press statements, anything that we have to do, we're going to do.
Doesn't appear to be affecting his actions.
De-escalation is coming from all sides. All sides believe that the only way to end this is, through a show of force. And the Russian president's come out and he said that cooler heads must prevail, that everybody needs to take it down a notch, and that, provocation's not going to get anyone anywhere.
Russia is against expanding the pool of nuclear powers, including North Korea. We've seen the forcible overthrow of regimes and invasions of other countries, which provokes an arms race. We need a more comprehensive approach to strengthen the system of guarantees, relying on international law. We have to return to dialogue with North Korea. We need to stop intimidating them and find peaceful solutions. I believe it's possible.
An intensity of launches like what we're seeing now being carried out by North Korea is nearly unprecedented, given that they're testing these intercontinental and regular ballistic missiles. So there's a lot of room for escalation, and let's just hope it doesn't come to that.
Although President Moon Jae-in is only 2 weeks into his new job, question marks grow on how the new administration plans to deal with North Korea. Understandable concerns as there's growing international calls for more pressure on Pyongyang, while the unfazed regime continues to carry out provocations. For some greater clarity on the situation, we turn to our Kwon Jang-ho.
Amid talks of the UN Security Council introducing further sanctions on North Korea, the international community is stepping up its own actions against the rogue state. According to Japanese newspaper Yomiuri Shimbun on Tuesday, Tokyo is reportedly reviewing plans to carry out secondary boycotts on any foreign companies or financial institutions that deal with the regime, with a particular focus on China, which accounts for around 90% of all North Korea's foreign trade.
The unidentified flying device was spotted crossing the military demarcation line. South Korea responded by firing warning shots. According to the Joint Chiefs of Staff on Tuesday, it was sighted at around 4 p.m. local time in Cheolwon, Gangwon-do province. The South Korean troops gave several warning broadcasts before firing off 90 machine gun rounds towards the north. The military believes the object was likely a North Korean drone and is currently analyzing its tracks. South Korean forces upped defense readiness and air surveillance in the region.
The location of North Korea's latest missile test is now confirmed to have been fired from an area called Yeonpung-ho, 70 kilometers north of Pyongyang. South Korea's Yonhap news agency consulted with geographic experts who were able to identify the site of last Sunday's launch from pictures released by the regime. Yeonpung-ho is a man-made lake in South Pyongan province, surrounded by mountains, providing a natural barrier against US or other foreign surveillance. The solid-fueled mid-range ballistic missile was fired from a mobile launcher, which was seen for the first time earlier this year. North Korea is insisting it has the right to test missiles if it wants and has blasted the United Nations for hitting the country with what it thinks are legally dubious sanctions. Speaking to reporters in New York, North Korea's Deputy UN Envoy Kim In-yong said the country categorizes its missile tests as, quote, part of normal procedures to bolster the military capabilities for self-defense and a process that has to be gone through for development. Kim said the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has yet to respond to North Korea's multiple requests to convene an international forum of legal experts to discuss the legal justification for UN sanctions implemented and tightened in recent years. 3 tests in 3 weeks. So that's how many times North Korea has launched a missile since President Moon Jae-in was inaugurated in mid-May. Experts say the continued provocations are Pyongyang's way of sending a message to South Korea and the United States. They also expect more to come over the next month ahead of a highly anticipated summit between Presidents Moon and Trump at the White House. Kim Hyo-sun has this report.
North Korea unexpectedly launched a ballistic missile on May 14th, just 5 days after Moon Jae-in was sworn in as South Korea's president.
We've succeeded in test launching a mid to long-range strategic ballistic missile, the Hwasong-12.
Just a week later, North Korea successfully test-fired a new mid-range missile known as the Provocations-2. And on early Monday morning, local time, the regime fired yet another ballistic missile, making it the 3rd launch since President Moon took office on May 10th.
Despite sanctions and international pressure, North Korea is developing nuclear and missile capabilities in accordance to its own roadmap.
As North Korea has threatened that the purpose of the Hwasong-12 is to target U.S. assets in Alaska and its operational theater in the Pacific, the regime's latest launches can be widely seen as an armed protest against Washington. Watchers say Pyongyang is attempting to nullify U.S.-led sanctions and pressure, and further strengthen its military capabilities to negotiate with the U.S. on a more level playing field. And to the South Korean government, the regime seems to be sending a message to bring a change to its North Korean policies that have involved imposing sanctions and pressuring the North. With the South Korea-U.S. summit scheduled for late June, most watchers expect Pyongyang to continue carrying out provocations until then.
North Korea is accusing the United States of flying its B-1B strategic bombers close to the inter-Korean border. Pyongyang's state-run media claimed that the B-1B bomber flew from Guam to Korea on Monday in a drill to practice dropping nuclear bombs. It said the bombers approached an area 80 kilometers east of Gangneung, an eastern city in South Korea located near the military demarcation line. South Korea's defense ministry said on Tuesday that the B-1B bombers were indeed here on the peninsula conducting a joint drill with the South Korean military, but did not disclose further details. North Korea has revealed that the missile it launched early Monday was a new type of precision-guided ballistic missile. If confirmed, this marks another step forward in Pyongyang's rapid advancement in terms of nuclear weapons technology. Kwon Jang-oh has this report.
A new type of ultra-precision rocket. That's how the Pyongyang state media has described the missile that was launched on Monday morning. Using a new precision control guidance system, the Korea Central News Agency reported that the test was a complete success and that the missile hit a planned target point in the EC within an accuracy of 7 meters.
The U.S. military makes history as North Korea attempts to join the historically small group of nations with the ability to send a nuclear weapon across thousands of miles. An American interceptor missile successfully destroyed an intercontinental ballistic missile today in what could be a dress rehearsal for a North Korean attack on the U.S. West Coast or other U.S. territory.
With North Korea issue becoming an imminent threat to peace in Northeast Asia, Washington and Beijing are looked to lead the way in solving the problem. Connie Kim takes us to the annual Jeju Forum, where scholars put their heads together to figure out what the two world powers should do in that respect.
North Korea has been consistent at using continuous provocations and a belligerent rhetoric directed specifically toward the U.S., thus maintaining a key role in the region's stability. But the regime's unpredictable nature has led to Washington to keep the option of military force possible, if not imminent. That, according to Alan Romberg, a former Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Public Affairs during the Clinton administration, who explained what the Trump administration's North Korea policy is at one of the security sessions in the annual Jeju Forum taking place in South Korea's Jeju Island.
If Pyongyang continues to refuse to reaffirm, even in principle, a commitment to eventual denuclearization, this raises the prospect that at some point, the American president, whenever this happens, whoever that is, may face a decision whether to take out certain North Korean military capabilities through the use of force, or instead to take a risk that the North will act rationally and not attack either its neighbors or the United States.
But before such a radical decision, the Trump administration also believes a peaceful resolution is possible, largely through the active participation of China.
The Trump administration has announced its latest sanctions against North Korea for its missile and nuclear provocations. The new measures have raised eyebrows as they're more far-reaching than anticipated, even targeting Russian entities with ties to the North. Park Jong-hong has this report.
U.S. sanctions against North Korea just got a lot sterner. The Treasury Department is targeting 4 individuals, including 1 Russian national, as well as 10 entities, which include North Korea's State Affairs Commission, the Korean People's Army, and the Ministry of People's Armed Forces. The department said the actions target North Korea's military, nuclear, and missile programs, its revenue from labor, coal, and minerals, as well as its overseas financial operations. What's noteworthy is a key blacklisted entity, the State Affairs Commission, which is North Korea's highest office, dubbed by the U.S. as a, quote, new supreme policy guidance organ. John Smith, director of the Treasury's Office of Foreign Asset Control, said his department is working with allies to counter networks that help fund North Korea's destabilizing activities. 3 Russian firms and 1 Russian individual were also sanctioned. Moscow-based Ardis Bearings LLC and its director, Igor Alexandrovich Michurin, were sanctioned for supporting a North Korean company accused of proliferating weapons of mass destruction. This comes as the U.S. and China are expected to seek a new UN Security Council resolution against North Korea. It aims to blacklist more North Koreans and entities to choke off money going into Pyongyang's nuclear and missile programs. Reuters quoted an unnamed source as saying the Security Council could hold a vote on a draft resolution as early as Friday.
This is a Fox News alert. You're looking at some file video there, but within the past few hours, we're getting news from South Korea that North Korea launched a salvo of ballistic missiles from the East Coast Thursday. The South Korean military is saying they're surface-to-ship missiles, and they're investigating the U.S. military, looking at all that this possibly means, especially with news out of South Korea today that we broke here on this show, that they were suspending the THAAD missile batteries that we were sending to South Korea, which was seen as a big victory for China, which was concerned about them, and possibly a big loss for the Trump administration. But now North Korea fires some missiles.
Hello, it's noon on Thursday, the 8th of June. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you, as always, for joining us. I'm Mark Broom. It is an all too regular occurrence these days. North Korea has fired off more missiles into the East Sea. South Korea's military is currently analysing the launches. Our Defence Ministry correspondent Kim Hyun-bin starts us off.
North Korea fired several missiles from its east coast Thursday morning, which flew some 200 kilometers before coming down in the East Sea. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff says these were surface-to-ship cruise missiles launched from a base near the city of Wonsan in Gangwon-do Province.
This launch is seen as an armed protest by the regime to show off the accuracy of its anti-ship missiles to warn the U.S. carrier strike group in the region. Also, the regime could be trying to gain leverage against the US and South Korea.
The JCS added that the South Korean military has beefed up surveillance and readiness for possible additional provocations. It is suspected that the missile launched this morning was of a type first revealed during a parade for the regime's late founder, Kim Il-sung's 105th birthday in mid-April. After the launch was detected, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff directly contacted President Moon Jae-in. This marks the fifth round of missile firings from the north since the new Liberal administration took office in early May, and comes even as President Moon pushes to improve inter-Korean relations.
Now, as a follow-up to that report, we are hearing that President Moon Jae-in is going to chair his first meeting of the National Security Council. That is going to be held at 2 p.m. Korea time, in just under 2 hours from now. They are going to discuss possible countermeasures to North Korea's ongoing missile provocations, and we'll have more details on that meeting during our next newscast at 2 p.m. Korea time. Now, South Korea and Japan have agreed to set up an emergency hotline between their defense ministers to be used primarily in the case of North Korean missile launches or provocations. Now, this is according to Japan's Jiji Press, and the establishment of the hotline was discussed by South Korea's Defense Minister Han Min-gu and his Japanese counterpart Tomomi Inada when the two met last week on the sidelines of a defense summit in Singapore. The hotline, which would have come in useful today, is aimed at enabling swift contact and the formulation of a joint response in case of a provocation by Pyongyang.
We're getting reaction tonight to North Korea's latest missile tests. They came on the same day South Korea's new president suspended installation of new U.S.-provided anti-missile defenses. Correspondent Kirsten Fisher is watching all of it tonight from the Pentagon.
When North Korea launched several surface-to-ship missiles about 24 hours ago, they landed in the same waters where, earlier this week, 2 U.S. aircraft carriers were conducting joint military exercises with the South Korean Navy. South Korean military leaders are saying the North likely wanted to show off its ability to precisely hit a large warship, while the country's new president is issuing this warning to his northern counterpart.
Our government, as I have already clarified multiple times, will not back off at all or compromise regarding national security and people's safety.
This latest launch was the 4th missile test by North Korea since South Korean President Moon Jae took office less than a month ago. He's been outspoken about his willingness to achieve denuclearization through both dialogue and diplomacy. He also pulled the plug on the full deployment of a crucial U.S. missile defense system just hours before this latest missile test took place. Today, the State Department spokeswoman said Pyongyang's most recent provocations prove why the Trump administration believes the THAAD missile defense system is so vital.
Something along the lines of THAAD is something that's important to not only protect U.S. forces, to protect our alliance, and also to protect help to further strengthen the region.
The move to suspend the deployment of THAAD, which had only become operational last month, is now being applauded by China and criticized on Capitol Hill.
It's obviously a blow to our national security interests, but larger than that, I think what it means is South Korea is not sure of the United States' commitment to their collective security. And it's part of, I think, a result of President Trump's foreign policy of America first.
An American held prisoner by North Korea is on his way home tonight, but under far less than ideal circumstances. It comes as the communist regime hosts another visit by this country's unlikely, unofficial diplomat. Correspondent Rich Edson is at the State Department tonight with the latest. Good evening, Rich.
Good evening, Brett. And Otto Warmbier is on his way back to Ohio. He will receive a full medical evaluation when he arrives, as North Korean diplomats say he has been in a coma for a year. This comes as a State Department official says a week ago, the U.S. met with North Korea's ambassador to the United States. That's when North Korea informed the U.S. of Warmbier's condition. A State Department official says the U.S. then told North Korea it was sending a delegation and medical team to Pyongyang. They landed yesterday. Members of the medical team evaluated Warmbier and confirmed his condition. They took off for the United States today. And this morning, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson announced the release.
The Department of State has secured the release
of Otto Warmbier from North Korea. He is on his way en route home to be reunited with his family.
Our purpose today is to describe the medical and neurological condition of Mr. Otto Warmbier, who arrived at our medical center approximately 40 hours ago. The Warmbier family has given us permission and has asked us to disclose his current medical condition. Mr. Warmbier arrived in Cincinnati at approximately 10 p.m. on June 13th. Dr. Jordan Bonomo and the transport team met the aircraft and assumed care of the patient at the airport. He was transported to the Neuroscience Intensive Care Unit at the University of Cincinnati Medical Center, where Dr. Brandon Foreman and his team were waiting. An extensive series of imaging and diagnostic tests began immediately upon his arrival at our hospital. Throughout this process, the Warmbier family has been at their son's bedside, and information has been continuously shared with them. His vital signs were stable upon arrival and have remained so. He requires no supplemental oxygen or respiratory assistance. He has no signs of infection or dysfunction of the major non-neurological organs. His neurological condition can be best described as a state of unresponsive wakefulness.
A North Korean man in his early 20s defected to South Korea early Sunday, crossing the border at 2:30 a.m. Korea time. Seoul's Joint Chiefs of Staff said the man was spotted at a northern part of the mouth of the Han River in Gimpo, and he is now being questioned by the military to find out what led him to flee.
I'm not looking for a lesson. I want to support Otto. Yes. I want to support my other children, my community. I'm proud of the way everybody's handled this, and I'm so grateful that Otto's with us. He's with people who love him now. That means a lot to us.
And is Fred Warmbier, the father of American college student Otto Warmbier, speaking out after North Korea's surprise release of his son from a prison this past week. However, Otto Warmbier was released after apparently suffering severe brain injuries in captivity. That is now raising serious questions about what happened to the exchange student after his arrest in 2016, and about the remaining 3 Americans we know the rogue regime is currently detaining.
This is North Korea's lame excuse for a spy drone. Seoul military announced the drone contained 555 pictures, mainly of the THAAD anti-missile system currently parked on a Seoul golf course.
Defense Ministry announced on Wednesday that the drone found in a remote border region was from North Korea. They say the drone was sent from Gyeonggang County in the north sometime in early May and crossed the military demarcation line.
Analysis shows that the drone was sent from Gyeonggang County in the north on May 2nd. It surveilled Seongju County, where THAAD is deployed, then crashed on its way back, a clear indication that it was sent by Pyongyang. This act by North Korea is a clear military provocation, violating the Armistice Agreement and the bilateral non-aggression pact.
This grave provocation could actually be the linchpin for action against North Korea. Chinese officials are meeting with the White House to review any final options of what has been a failed attempt at reining the rogue country in.
The Chinese have a similar position that to ours on this issue. They support denuclearization. They have also, as you know, announced a ban on the importation of DPRK coal, and they've undertaken a number of other efforts. We've seen all kinds of countries in the international community also step up their own actions in regards to squeezing the North Korean regime's economic lifelines and try to cut back on the possibility of proliferation activity.
Donald Trump has tweeted, "While I greatly appreciate the efforts of President Xi in China to help with North Korea, it has not worked out. At least I know China tried."
It's clear to me that Kim Jong-un, the regime, is on a path of attempting to develop an intercontinental ballistic missile and matching that with a nuclear warhead that can reach the United States. We should be concerned about that, and we are. The primary means of dealing with that is diplomatic and economic pressure, a campaign led by Secretary Tillerson. The military dimension on a day-to-day basis is in support of Secretary Tillerson, and as a result, we have a very open dialogue, a very aggressive dialogue with the State Department to make sure that everything that we're doing in terms of our military posture is supportive of Secretary Tillerson's primarily economic and diplomatic campaign.
The United States remains committed to holding North Korea accountable for multiple violations of UN Security Council resolutions which expressly prohibit its nuclear weapons and ballistic missile programs. We regret that it is the North Korean people who suffer when the regime diverts resources to these prohibited programs, and we urge the DPRK regime to choose a better path for its people.
The U.S. military is preparing for what may be the sixth nuclear test by North Korea, a move that could easily cause a military response. Four-star General Jack Keane says that bombing North Korea may be the only option left, but that won't be an easy task. As Michael Snyder points out, bombing North Korea is not like bombing Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, or Syria. The North Koreans already have nuclear weapons, and the U.S. better destroy them all in an overwhelming initial assault, because Kim Jong-un will use any that survive to strike back. Meanwhile, Yonhap News Agency reports North Korea's top envoy to India on Wednesday offered a conditional moratorium on his country's nuclear and missile tests in an apparent bid to hold talks with the United States. North Korea ambassador to India, Ki Chung-yong, said Pyongyang is willing to talk in terms of freezing its nuclear and missile tests under certain circumstances. Ki said in English, "If our demands is met, we can negotiate in terms of the moratorium of such as weapons testing." He suggested that one of the key demands is the halt of the U.S. joint military drills with South Korea, which Pyongyang denounced as a rehearsal for invasion. Seoul and Washington say their annual exercises are defensive in nature. Good luck with that, Pyongyang. The last moratorium on missiles and nuclear tests unraveled after just 2 months back in 2012, and South Korean President Moon has no intention of scaling back so that North Korea can obviously launch an unprecedented attack. How about freeing the 3 Americans held in your prisons first, and then we can talk?
North Korea has reportedly conducted a test of a rocket engine that could potentially be used to power an intercontinental ballistic missile. Reuters and Fox News, citing unnamed US officials, say Pyongyang may have been testing the smallest stage of an ICBM rocket engine. It would represent the regime's first rocket engine test since it conducted 3 back in March. It also comes at a time when the United States has reported increased activity at North Korea's Seoul nuclear test site.
And more saber rattling from North Korea. Pyongyang's foreign ministry is threatening to carry out a resolute act of justice if the U.S. slaps more sanctions on the regime. It also defended its latest ballistic missile test, saying it was necessary to send a clear warning to the U.S. Pyongyang added it would deploy its nuclear arsenal to teach Washington a lesson if it does not heed with warnings. The launch came just a day after the U.S. Senate approved a package of sweeping sanctions against North Korea, as well as Russia and Iran.
Has revealed more details about Tuesday's launch of an ICBM. New advancements are said to have contributed to it being the longest range missile the regime has ever developed. We have on the line Kwon Jang-oh, who has more details for us. So Jang-oh, Pyongyang's missile development is happening fast.
Yes, good morning, Mark. Yes, so North Korea has confirmed that 2 new technological milestones were reached in yesterday's missile launch. Those are successful atmospheric re-entry and successful stage separation. Now, the report boasted that the new Hwasong-12 missile was able to carry a large and heavy warhead, and that despite extremely high temperatures and severe vibrations during re-entry, the interior of the load remained at a stable 25 to 45 degrees Celsius.
In a rapid show of force against North Korea for Tuesday's now confirmed ICBM test, the South Korean and US militaries have conducted an offensive ballistic missile drill of their own aimed at striking the North's leadership. For more, we connect live to our Kim Hyun-bin at the Ministry of National Defense in Seoul. So Hyun-bin, the Allies wasted little time to send such a strong signal to Kim Jong-un.
That's right, Mark. South Korea and the U.S. staged a massive combined ballistic missile exercise this morning, and it was aimed at sending a strong warning to Pyongyang that the allies are ready and willing to destroy key facilities in the north with a push of a button. Now, the large-scale drill comes less than 24 hours after North Korea test-fired its ICBM. Now, South Korea fired a ballistic missile known as Hyunmoo-2, and the U.S. fired a tactical surface-to-surface missile into South Korea's territorial waters in the East Sea. Now, in a statement released by the presidential office of Cheongwade earlier today, the drills were conducted on the order of President Moon Jae-in. It was stressed the need to demonstrate the allies' defense posture with action and not just a statement. Now, U.S. President Donald Trump welcomed the move, saying he highly praised President Moon's reaction to the North's provocation.
A device that experts say could have reached as far as the US state of Alaska. North Korea has also announced that such missiles in the future could be easily equipped with nuclear warheads. That's an announcement that's got Washington calling on the international community to do more. The UN Security Council will be in session later this Wednesday to discuss this latest test.
Well, Shannon, I worry a bit that the Chinese, after the meeting with President Trump at Mar-a-Lago, basically said, we'll take care of this North Korea problem, and, you need to relax the pressure over here on these other issues with South China Sea, trade, currency manipulation, and we're seeing now that the Chinese have not stepped up to the plate. There were some initial good signs, but they have, trade has increased between China and North Korea, and they haven't really done what they need to do to clamp down on North Korea's missile program.
Yeah, we see the president tweeting as much, publicly calling them out on that trade issue this morning. We know he's going to meet with President Xi at the G20 in a couple of days. In the meantime, I know you think there needs to be a shift in the way that China perceives this issue. We talk a lot about the fact that they don't want North Korea to fall apart and their borders to be flooded with millions of refugees. But you say it's about convincing them that a war for them is an even worse scenario.
Yeah, the Chinese calculus needs to change here. The two things that they're most worried about is a collapsed North Korean regime with refugees flowing across, as you mentioned, or a unified Korean peninsula that's friendly to the United States, and then they are faced with U.S. troops on the Yalu River on their border. That calculus needs to change to where the Chinese are more worried about war on the Korean peninsula and a preemptive U.S. strike to take this program out, so that they move to take action themselves. And Shannon, I've got to tell you, at this point, I don't think Kim Jong-un is ever going to give up, and we need to think about regime change in North Korea, either driven by the U.S. or the message needs to be to the Chinese, driven by you.
When President Trump asked for military options for North Korea, this unit of B-1 bombers could be called on. They carry the largest conventional payload in the U.S. Air Force and fly almost weekly over the Korean peninsula.
I had some pretty severe things that we're thinking about. That doesn't mean we're going to do them. I don't draw red lines.
In the wake of North Korea's intercontinental ballistic missile test on July 4th, Defense Secretary Jim Mattis, talking off-camera to reporters at the Pentagon today, downplayed any talk of war.
I do not believe this capability in itself brings us closer to war, because the President's been very clear, Secretary of State's been very clear, that we are leading with diplomatic and economic efforts.
So what are the President's military options?
There is evidently an underground facility now being built or in operation to develop uranium for weapons. This is a centrifuge facility. It's possible you could use earth penetrators to destroy that.
North Korea has an estimated 10 plutonium-based nuclear warheads, but it's the thousands of artillery units trained on the 10 million civilians living in Seoul that stymies talk of military action.
There's no credible way that you can neutralize quickly the artillery weapons that are within range of Seoul. Basically, a lot of them are in buried areas. If this escalated to any kind of major war, we're probably talking about relatively quickly casualties in the tens of thousands and possibly hundreds of thousands.
The U.S. now has 36 underground missile interceptors based in Alaska and California. That number will increase to 44 by the end of this year.
We have enough interceptors to defeat the threat and the number of missiles from North Korea or Iran.
In December, the Pentagon put Special Operations Command in charge of countering weapons of mass destruction. This means that the elite SEAL, Ranger, and Delta Force teams will be tasked with coming up with plans for how to deal with North Korea's nukes.
Korea, since last September, seems to have added some plutonium to its stockpiles for nuclear weapons, though the amount isn't yet known. According to the U.S.-based website 38 North, which monitors the regime, thermal imagery shows that Pyongyang appears to have increased plutonium production at its main nuclear complex in Yongbyon from September through this June. The report said the radiochemical laboratory was operating on and off, and that there had been at least 2 reprocessing campaigns to produce an undetermined amount of plutonium. The report noted increased thermal activity at Yongbyon's uranium enrichment facility as well.
Morning, Rob and Heather. Yeah, we keep coming back to just how significant this launch was from the North Koreans. Not only is it the first missile capable of hitting the Alaskan coast, something President Trump said would never happen, but it was also launched from a mobile launcher, meaning it is almost impossible to track, and we simply wouldn't know how many the North Koreans had or where they might be. Today, the US and South Korean military responded by holding a combined ballistic military drill, firing missiles into the sea off South Korea. Commanders issued a statement saying self-restraint was now all that separated armistice and war and could be changed at any time. Also that it would be a grave mistake for the North Koreans to think otherwise. Yesterday's North Korean ICBM traveled around 578 miles towards Japan, but at about 1,200 miles high, at a different trajectory that could, many believe, hit the Alaskan coast. The groundbreaking launch was personally overseen by Kim Jong-un, a flexing of his muscles on America's Independence Day. Secretary Tillerson has now responded, saying the United States strongly condemns North Korea's launch of an intercontinental ballistic missile. Testing an ICBM represents a new escalation of the threats to the United States, our allies and partners, the region and the world. Global action is required to stop a global threat.
Now, South Korea wants to change the direction of inter-Korean relations. Seoul has officially proposed holding military talks with North Korea in a bid to cool rising tensions. The Defense Ministry has suggested the two sides meet this Friday. North Korea has yet to respond, but watchers say there is a good chance Pyongyang will agree to talk, but it may suggest a different date. Kim Hyun-bin with this report.
South Korea's Vice Defense Minister Seo Ju-seok proposed on Monday inter-Korean military talks as a way to reduce tensions along the heavily fortified border.
Waiting for North Korea to respond to South Korea's suggestion to hold military talks, the line is still cold. As a result, the talks that Seoul suggested takes place today at the border village of Panmunjom have been canceled. Now let's get the latest from our Kim Hyun-bin standing by at the Defense Ministry for us. We've been hoping for a response, Hyun-bin, but it was not to be.
That's right, Simon. I should mention the proposed inter-Korean talks have been scrapped as North Korea didn't bother responding to the proposal aimed at cooling cross-border tensions.
Despite growing calls within the United States to redesignate North Korea as a state sponsoring terrorism, the regime is not included on that list. However, Washington noted Pyongyang is not fully cooperating with efforts to counter terrorism or eliminate financing of such activities. Connie Kim updates us on the annual report.
The United States has decided to leave North Korea off its list of state sponsors of terrorism for the 9th straight year, despite growing calls to put Pyongyang back on it. The State Department's annual country reports on terrorism said it delisted Pyongyang in 2008, as the regime had not supported international terrorism during the preceding 6-month period, and based on the North's assurances that it would not support terrorism acts in the future. The U.S. designated Pyongyang as a state sponsor of terrorism in 1988 after North Korean agents bombed a South Korean airliner, killing 115 people aboard, but it was dropped from the list in 2008 in exchange for progress in the denuclearization talks. Nevertheless, this year's report said Pyongyang has been recertified as not cooperating fully with U.S. counterterrorism efforts, and noted the North's failure to show meaningful progress in strengthening its infrastructure for anti-money laundering and countering the financing of terrorism. Following the regime's apparent murder of Kim Jong-un's half-brother Kim Jong-nam and its 5th nuclear test last year, a sizable number of U.S. lawmakers had wanted North Korea back on the terrorism blacklist, but the State Department said designating the North would only have a symbolic meaning.
To another Fox News alert right now, the U.S. will be banning all travel to North Korea. That's according to a Wall Street Journal report citing 2 travel agencies known for bringing Western tourists there. They say the ban will go into effect in August. One of the agencies in question helped get Otto Warmbier to North Korea, where he was arrested and sentenced to 15 years of hard labor. He died 6 days after being brought back to the U.S. in a coma.
We start with North Korea, where recent satellite imagery shows activity at a shipyard, signaling a potential missile launch, this time from below the water. The latest development comes after the North ignored South Korea's offer for military talks aimed at easing tensions. Now, could this possible provocation be the regime's answer to Seoul's proposal? Connie Kim has the story.
Seoul has proposed dialogue with the North, urging the regime to halt its provocations, but activity in Pyongyang suggests it has no plans to stop its missile tests. Recent satellite imagery from U.S.-based North Korea monitoring website 38 North shows a Shinpo-class experimental ballistic missile submarine and a submersible test stand barge have been lined up together. New buildings at the shipyard have also been constructed, leading to 38 North's assessments that Pyongyang could be preparing for a submarine-launched ballistic missile launch. There is speculation that the next missile to be fired is the Provocations-3, which the North showed off in a photo celebrating the successful launch of their Hwasong-14 ICBM earlier this month. A Shinpo-class submarine is currently only able to carry 1 SLBM, which is why military weapons experts say missiles need to get smaller in size in order for the submarine to be able to carry multiple SLBMs.
North Korea seems to be boasting of its plan to develop Provocations-3 submarine-launched ballistic missiles that have become shorter but have higher engine output.
The United States is planning to conduct another test of its anti-missile shield to counter the growing threat from North Korea. The Pentagon could launch a THAAD anti-missile interceptor as early as next weekend from a base off the southern coast of Alaska. The United States is reportedly concerned North Korea could launch another ballistic missile by the end of this week. Quoting an anonymous U.S. defense official, CNN says transporter vehicles carrying ballistic missile launching equipment were spotted moving near Hwasong. This usually indicates a launch within 6 days, which also coincides with the July 27th anniversary of the Korean War Armistice Agreement. And in the wake of the death of college student Otto Warmbier, the U.S. government announced this month that Americans will soon be prohibited from traveling to North Korea. While it's expected to deal a heavy blow to the regime's small tourism industry, one official claims Pyongyang isn't that concerned.
North Korea is warning the United States that it will launch a preemptive nuclear strike on the American heartland if it feels the regime is being threatened by Washington. The remarks came from Pyongyang's Armed Forces Minister Park Yong-sik on Wednesday during a speech to commemorate the 64th anniversary of the Korean War Armistice Agreement. The key date, which is actually today, has been designated by the North as Victory Day, with the regime claiming it prevailed over the US in the Korean War. The threat comes after Pyongyang snubbed Seoul's request to hold joint military talks to soothe rising tensions on the Korean peninsula. Now, in a worrying development, South Korea's defense ministry has confirmed the discovery of what was, at least, an unexploded landmine near the inter-Korean border. Soldiers discovered the North Korean mine on Thursday near Achado Island in Gangwon County. The landmine, found inside a wooden box, seems as though it had been washed downstream by monsoon rain. It was safely defused and the mine has been removed. Ministry officials are urging local residents to be careful and report to the authorities immediately if they see any more mines in the area.
The Pentagon can confirm that North Korea did launch a ballistic missile at about 10:45 Eastern Time. This is the second launch since July 4th, when North Korea launched for the first time an intercontinental ballistic missile which traveled about 1,700 miles into outer space, an astonishing 7 times higher than the orbit of NASA's International Space Station. putting Alaska in range. Right now, the Pentagon is still assessing the launch. It just happened 45 minutes ago. So you can bet, Melissa, that the U.S. spy agencies and anybody that has to do with ballistic missile launches is looking at the data. Right now, Pentagon officials do not know if this North Korean reentry vehicle or warhead re-entered the Earth's atmosphere. There are some reports from Japan that something splashed down in waters off the Japan near the Japanese Coast Guard. What's noteworthy, of course, is North Korea does not coordinate these launches with anyone, of course. So if there's airplanes, satellites, or anything up above, North Korea doesn't coordinate or send out a warning to stay out of the airspace like the U.S. Air Force would do, for instance, if it was launching a missile.